We're going to get the conversation started. We're going to bring our panelists up front here. Who should we start with? Miss Jessica Hoppe. Jessica is passionate about her work and committed to working in her client's best interest. As a trusted financial advisor, Jessica has great skill in offering valuable advice to customers to help them achieve their goals. She takes great pride in building strong relationships with customers and getting to know them. Helping her clients succeed is the most rewarding part of her job. I believe banking and finance go beyond the numbers, and that is my profession, and that in my profession I can make a positive difference in people's lives, she says. She has 17 years in the industry, and Jessica's clients have referenced her as an open-minded, solution-driven, knowledgeable, and strategic. Quote, an excellent person to have on your side to link all your business and financial needs together. So thank you for joining us, Jessica, from Alerus Financial at the 32nd Avenue. I can't think of the address down there. Right across from Essential Health. Jessica. Oh no, since you're standing right here. Standing next to me is the handsome Doug Johnson. Doug is the president of TCI Insurance in West Fargo on Beaton Drive. Company started in 1985, owned by Doug and Steve Huber. Currently 2 offices, West Fargo and Wimbledon, North Dakota. Currently employs 6 agents and 8 staff, and looking to expand its brand through acquisition or coordination with businesses or independent agencies. TCI is licensed in several states and work in most lines of insurance, with a heavy emphasis in ag, farm, crop, associated personal insurance, the commercial businesses, and all lines supporting the ag industry. Doug is an NDSU grad in business administration, worked in the farm chemical industry for 5 years, has been with TCI for 18 years. His primary business sector is crop insurance, but works in all types of insurance. Doug has his AFIS and CIC insurance designations, and we welcome him here this morning. Mr. Doug Johnson. The less handsome Mr. David Chapman. David always looks sharp. David concentrates his practice on immigration law, legal ethics and malpractice, and constitutional law. David has practiced law for 13 years with a wide range of experience. David is a tremendous asset to the clients he serves throughout the United States as well as in other countries. In the area of immigration, David advises clients on a wide range of issues related to employment and business-based visas. As an immigrant and naturalized citizen, David knows family-based immigration from a very personal perspective. David is also an avid supporter of American business as the avenue to future growth and succession for the nation. Government does not create economic growth. Businesses and individual Americans do. This firm belief in the ingenuity of American business has led David to focus more and more on the business community in his practice and to assist them in bringing the very best talent to be found worldwide into the American workforce. The goal is not to supplant the American worker, but to supplement our already great workforce and make the American business community an even more formidable force internationally. David and his wife and son currently reside in West Fargo with their golden retrievers, Dexter and Darby. That's a nice speech, David. Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Kim Bjoralt. As a human resources consultant and former health insurance executive, Kim brings 30 years of sales management and employee benefits experience to business owners and executives. Kim brings an insightful, strategic, and practical implementation talents to clients that are challenged, overwhelmed, and even non-compliant in the complex world of human resource management. There's 2 questions. How is your HR model serving your business purpose? And do you need to reinforce, rethink, or reinvent your current approach that serve clients around the region? Kim is the founder and CEO of Human Resource Management Group, LLC, a human resource consulting and outsourcing firm here in Fargo. Mr. Kim Bjoralt. So we're just going to crank right into this. Who's got a quick opening statement on covering your assets?
First, I guess the one thing that I learned from the introduction is I got to update my website because it's now 7 years old. I have done a lot of immigration work in the past, but I'm doing a lot more business work, and primarily I'm doing a lot of recovery of damages for malpractice committed by attorneys recently. And so some of my points today will actually have to do with that issue and protecting yourself and protecting your businesses down the road from mistakes and also from other business-related issues that can lead to liability. And I guess I'll just pass it along now and let the next opening statements, and then we'll get back to the point.
Thank you. I think just one thing to take into consideration when you listen to all of us here today is it's probably a lot less expensive to do what you need to do up front and do your homework today than to have to call David here as an attorney and pay a lot more in the back end of things. So I think you'll hear a lot from us. Kurt asked us to, do a lot with some individual examples or case studies you'll probably hear as well. So I think you get a good feel for what you need to do to cover your assets.
Good afternoon. I want to introduce a couple guys that are here with the agency. Adam Schuler is here, Bo Sheely, and Eric Updahl. And then Jan Johnson is here. She gets us all paid on time, so that's fantastic. One of the things when the group met and we started talking about our lists is there's a lot of crossover. And I don't know how this is going to go today. I don't know that it's going to be quite as cut and dry where we're going to go legal, then insurance, then financial, then human resource. Because when I look at the legal things, I'm like, oh, there's 4 or 5 insurance things in there. And financial, there's 4 or 5. Human resource, I'm like, I had those same questions. And one of the insurance is not known as the sexiest thing in the world. We think it is. We love it. But it's boring, and it's an afterthought. And it's supposed to be that way, so when something does happen, if the process has gone correctly, the reaction on the other side is not, oh boy, it's don't worry. So that's, I think that's a general theme across the board, is that's kind of the goal.
So when I was thinking about what I would put together for this, in the world of finance, there's a lot of different ways that your business can be impacted. But I'm going to focus probably mostly today on fraud, internal and externally. Cash is king, so if you lose your cash unexpectedly, it certainly can be quite painful. So I'll touch on that and maybe give you some stories of situations that I've seen and how they could have been prevented. So that's all I have.
Okay, so hand that back to David. We're going to start right at number 1 in the legal section. And as I mentioned, feel free to raise your hands, shout something out. If you've got a prime example of a legal something that's happened to you, your business, whatever else, now's the time to shout them out. We can help everybody in the room learn whatever experience that may have been. So we'll let David just go right to number 1.
Okay, the first one I had on my list is when you're hiring an attorney for business issues or for anything else, make sure that you understand their billing methods. And also get them to give you a written fee agreement or a retainer letter. And one thing to understand is North Dakota does not require attorneys to provide their clients a written fee agreement. States like Minnesota, they do require written fee agreements, and attorneys have been disciplined for not giving those written fee agreements. But in North Dakota, even a simple email that says, I bill at $200-300 an hour, that's enough. And nothing else has to be included. They just have to understand that that's what's going to be billed per hour. My office and any reputable firm will give you a written fee agreement that explains a number of different things regarding billing, regarding their responsibilities and duties to you, confidentiality, and things like that. So I always tell people, when they come to me and they say, well, my attorney made a mess of things, the first thing I want to see is their fee agreement. Because that sort of tells me what kind of operation that they hired to represent them in their case.
Well, I should also point out the mark of a brilliant attorney. David waited until yesterday to send me his 10 things. So he's on the last page by himself as a legal addendum. So don't follow the first 10 on that big sheet. Go to the last 7 pages. Brilliant.
The second thing is think down the road, because attorneys are human. They make mistakes, and I see a lot of them. As I said, a lot of my practice lately has been taken up by attorney malpractice. And cases that come to me where some of them are just blatant mistakes, some of them are simple missteps. The guy was human, made a mistake one day, and there was damages caused. ask the attorney whether they've got malpractice insurance. And in North Dakota, attorneys are not required to carry malpractice insurance, which for me defies logic. We make people who drive a car have insurance, but attorneys are not required to. And a lot of attorneys do not carry insurance. You can check. You can, once you find out, once you've decided who that attorney is going to be that's going to represent you, you can simply call the Supreme Court, because every year when an attorney renews their license, they have to disclose to the Supreme Court whether or not they have malpractice insurance. If they don't and they check the box, the Supreme Court can tell you right away. If the attorney you've contacted and talked to has indicated they do not have malpractice insurance, find somebody else. Because if they make a mistake, the chances are the damages could be significant and that attorney's not going to have assets to cover the damages. And plus, if they are going to be sued personally and there's no insurance company to stand and defend them, they're going to be in a situation where they are going to fight, because it's then their assets that are on the line. They won't admit fault or do anything else. I find that the easiest cases to resolve, whether finding out, hey, there was no malpractice, or yes, definitely there was damages here, are those cases where the attorney has an insurance company. And that's because you end up dealing with the insurance company who knows what negligence in an attorney case is, and they're looking at the elements as well as the attorney seeking the claim. So generally it works out a lot better. Yeah.
When an attorney is retained by a client, if the client does not disclose to the attorney all of the material facts of a case, and the attorney acts on the fact that he or she does not have all of the knowledge, what liability does the attorney have if they proceed and at the end of the day they find out, ooh, I didn't know that?
That would depend. In North Dakota, attorneys are expected to perform and provide services up to the standards, the community standards for attorneys in the state. So if a client were driving drunk and hit somebody, for instance, and they come to the attorney to be defended, and they don't say they were drunk and they weren't found out to be drunk, say they left the scene, and the attorney doesn't even ask or make any investigation, I think any reasonable attorney in the state would ask, did you have any medications? Were you drinking before the accident? If they don't ask that and they go forward to trial and it's discovered that there was liability there based on the use of alcohol or drugs, then I think that attorney has committed malpractice. It depends on what the attorneys in the community would have asked for, and it's the community of North Dakota.
Minnesota the same way?
Minnesota has close to the same standard. It's worded a little bit differently. Frankly, I like North Dakota's. The North Dakota Supreme Court has formulated the test, which is much along the same standards as what a doctor would be required to do, the standard of care. And North Dakota has defined it as being what a reasonable attorney with knowledge of the facts would have done in that situation. And the question would be, should the attorney have had knowledge of the facts? If they should have, then they've got a problem. Okay, number 3, and this is one that I actually ran into, check with your attorney to see what's happening in a case. Legal practice is one of the most regulated areas of practice in the country. I think it's even more regulated than accounting or anything else. The rules regarding ethics and professional responsibility are very extensive and they're not common sense. So we've created this perception with the public that we've got this person who's going to be able to handle this case. But unfortunately, if your attorney makes mistakes and screws up or doesn't do anything, and you show up in court and say, well, Your Honor, my attorney didn't tell me any of this stuff, there is a good chance that the judge is going to say, well, what did you ask the attorney? Well, nothing. I gave the case to him. I expected he was handling it. I've actually had cases where judges have said, you're expected to call your attorney if you haven't heard from him in 6 months and find out what's happening in the case, which I tend to differ with, because when you've got a licensed professional sitting there that you've entrusted your life basically and your case to, and they make a mistake, I think that's on them and not on the client to be able to ask. but it has been brought up in court, and sometimes, clients will be held responsible for what their attorney does. The North Dakota Supreme Court has said that because clients have tried to get out of judgments and things like that because attorneys have tripped up, and the courts have said, unless it is absolute gross negligence, no, client's responsible. Your recourse is to go after the lawyer, which then, of course, leads back to the insurance issue, and if they don't have it, you would be sorry in that situation. Number 4, of course, is, and this leads into the information and the question that I got regarding, has an attorney committed malpractice if they have missed something? Don't withhold anything from the attorney, because attorneys are only as good as the information they get, and in a lot of cases, things can be a surprise that are crucial to a case. So if you think something is not important, share it anyway, because the attorney's the one that's going to make the decision as to whether that's crucial or not. There may be a difference in facts that completely turns the case, and you can incur a lot of expense and find out down the road you really don't have a case, when in fact you could have known that early on had the whole facts been put on the table before the person. This is an interesting one that actually I learned through a continuing legal education course that I taught and some research that I did, and that is, be careful what you and also what your attorney publicizes publicly. There's something called attorney-client confidentiality, which pretty much everybody understands. If they go into the lawyer's office, they expect that things are going to be confidential. But there's also a rule of evidence called privilege. And privilege protects information in North Dakota, not only that is confidential, but information that is shared between the attorney and their staff or any other person part of the case, which is helping to deliver legal services to that person. And I ran into it this summer when I was teaching, because the Metro Washington Transit Authority out in the District of Columbia had hired a lawyer to investigate an employment discrimination case. And the lawyer from a big firm went through and did a whole report, and in that report he cited 2 specific confidential affidavits filed by individuals who work for the Transit Authority. And he provided the report specifically to the board of directors of the company. Well, the board of directors of the company sat down, looked at the report, and then decided that this was a political issue because they were all political appointees. They released it publicly. And they did not release the affidavits and supporting information. They said, no, that's all privileged. And their inside counsel said, that's privileged, don't release that. But then when it came to litigation later on, the other side brought a discovery request. A discovery request is getting documents. And they said, we want all those affidavits. And the Transit Authority said, no, you can't have them because they're privileged and confidential. The U.S. District Court in the District of Columbia disagreed and said you have to turn over all the affidavits, because they referred specifically to those affidavits and little parts of what were in those affidavits throughout the report. As a result, by releasing just a little bit, they opened the door and released everything. So everything had to be turned over, and they ended up, from what I understand, they were in settlement discussions the last time that I heard in the summer, because the Transit Authority really didn't have a leg to stand on at that point. They didn't have any information that they could protect. For number 5, especially for larger and mid-sized businesses, during the early part of the 21st century, 2001 through 2003, I was in-house counsel for one of Daimler Chrysler's subsidiaries here in Fargo. Some of you might remember Global Electric Motor Cars. And for a little over a year, I did that job. And an in-house counsel is somebody, if you've got a business that's big enough and if you have enough money on the line, you very well may want to consider in-house counsel. And that person is not going to be the upfront person litigating cases and fighting your battles for you. They're almost as, as the president of the company at that time, Ken Montler, told me, he said, you're sort of like the traffic cop. He said, I want you to be directing what everybody else, all our outside counsel do. And that was my role at the company. I looked over contracts and kept things running smoothly, but at the same time, I also coordinated with outside counsel. It will save you a lot of money because the in-house counsel knows exactly what the outside counsel needs, and they'll ask the right questions internally, and they'll convey that information to outside counsel, gather documents and the like. Plus, it avoids surprises down the road. You're not going to have a case blow up on you because you've got a person in-house who knows what they've got to do.
Do you know any small businesses in town that share in-house counsel?
I don't. I really don't. I think, I know there's a number of businesses in town that are larger that have in-house counsel, and I know Sanford definitely does. They've got lots of lawyers in-house, Blue Cross and that do, but smaller businesses, I don't. Number 7, and this is one that from a business owner standpoint, even myself as running my own law firm, I make sure my employees know the boundaries that they've got to operate within, anyone who's ever worked for my firm, because as a business, you're going to be responsible for the most part for everything that your employees do while they're working, unless they're off on some completely crazy, as they call it, lark of their own in the law. If they just take off and go completely outside the boundaries of what they're supposed to be doing, then that's something you might have a defense on. But if your employee commits to something within your business, you can expect that somebody's going to be there arguing that you as a business owner are responsible for everything that that employee did. My number 8 was to ensure that your employees have appropriate training and information concerning what is and what is not appropriate concerning employee interaction in the workplace. And a lot of lawyers out there now make their living off of sexual harassment suits, for instance, or hostile work environment lawsuits, because employees react differently to the conduct of other employees. What may be a joke to one person is really not a joke to the other person. And I know that when I was with Chrysler, they trained the employees. They had training sessions where everybody went to, and actually had, and that was 16 years ago, had to sit through training sessions and understand what jokes are appropriate, what jokes are not appropriate, what conduct is appropriate and is not appropriate. So as a business owner, it pays to have somebody come in who has knowledge of that, to work with the employees, and to get them to understand what is appropriate and what is not in terms of the boundaries of their conduct.
Sense of humor training.
Yeah. Secure your data. This is a big one, and this has actually been a big one for attorneys. I mean, a group nationally called the Association of Professional Responsibility Lawyers, and we had a conference where we discussed this, and I've actually lectured on this as well. Big thing nowadays is save money, go to the cloud. You know, get rid of your server, get rid of all the hardware because it's expensive. It's expensive to have people upkeep that. But what I tell lawyers is know where your data is going. And I know, for instance, that the cloud, you can put your data in the cloud, and unlike putting it on your server in your office, it can be on 7 or 8 different locations anywhere. And they can even farm it out to other countries, to companies in other countries to store that information. If you're storing it in other countries, you got to realize that they may not have the same protections for data that we do in the United States, and it may be a lot more open to hacking and to stealing. And for attorneys, it's a big deal because obviously it's confidential stuff. And it's the same with financial services sector or any other sector that has confidential information. You can end up liable if somebody gets into that information, steals it, and uses it. And I guess the final thing is, and I have run into this in my commercial practice, and this is just interaction between businesses, and even small businesses, when you're dealing with a larger business, sometimes, and myself for instance, as a small firm, sometimes I just assume that the big business knows what they're doing, but I still find things in their contracts that are objectionable to me. read your contracts, and if you've got in-house counsel, make sure that the in-house counsel signs off on it. If not, if you've got an attorney, take it to the attorney and have the attorney read through the contract. And that includes leases. If you are leasing office space, understand what you're leasing and understand what the landlord for that property has in terms of their rights and in terms of what they expect. And keep in mind that if they've written the contract, they've written it for themselves and not for you. So keep that in mind when you're going out there in terms of leasing space. So I'll pass it along to that.
Anybody have any questions? Legally related experiences? So with that, we'll move on to the insurance section. Mr. Johnson.
Hello.
And now we're back to the page that was printed out.
Mine wasn't too much further in front of Dave's when I sent it over, but just kind of a recap on the legal side. If your interest perked up, there were numerous times where he mentioned the insurance piece. So whether it's property, whether it's liability, whether it's employer's liability in your workplace, things like that, there's a contract involved. And so just a show of hands, who in here has insurance? Anybody? Okay. So when you think about it, you start thinking about the insurances that you do have. Auto insurance, it's required by the state. Homeowner's insurance, if you have a mortgage, it's required by your lender. Business insurance, life insurance, health insurance may or may not be required by the government. We're not really sure. I don't think we want to dive into that one. But there's all these different kinds of insurance, and then at what level do you understand it? So when I get a health insurance question, I call Eric Updahl, because I used to be up on health insurance, and then when the Affordable Care Act came in there's all kinds of crazy things that were outside my expertise. So if you have ever looked at your insurance policy, there's a page on the front. It's the summary, it's got all the good details, it's got your name on there, and then there's a bunch of pages behind it. Do you know who wrote the pages behind it? The legal guys. When something goes wrong and there's a disagreement, it goes back to the legal guys. So it's a contract written by lawyers, intended to be interpreted by attorneys, and it will be essentially be decided in the courts. So how detailed does it get? There was a new homeowners form, insurance lingo, so there's generalized forms that come out. There was a new homeowners form that came out in 2000. The majority of the companies use that, so it doesn't matter if you have insurance with Nationwide or Safeco or Farmers Union or NODAC, the form is similar behind there. Guy had an awesome tractor. He's retired. He mowed his property with it, and he had a claim. He picked up a rock and threw it through a window, caused some damage. Calls the insurance company. The adjuster comes out. They're a wily bunch, the adjusters. And I'm going to tell you right now, every time you have a claim, they think you did it. If there's theft, they think you stole it. If there's a fire, they think you started it. And in North Dakota, we get a little offended by that, but they deal with all over the United States. There's all kinds of insurance fraud, so that's how they're wired. So the adjuster comes out, he's like, man, this is a sweet tractor. Really nice, because yeah, I love it. I'm on it all the time. I mow my yard, I mow the church, I mow the cemetery, I help mow the football field. It's like, wait a second. The policy says we will cover a four-wheel conveyance used solely for the use of the premise. That means his property. Now he uses it all over town, helping people out. I mean, how bad can that be? Claim was denied. So then, of course, got pushed in court. Decision came down, yep, company's right. So they had to change the one word from solely to primarily. So then that opened that you can use it other places. So inside that contract, there's tons of definitions. And I'm sure, you know, my homeowner's renewed. I've got the unopened envelope sitting on my desk right now. It renewed November 9th. I got it back in October. Just like you guys, I rip that open, just like a Christmas card, and I read that thing from top to bottom. You're just assuming that everything's okay. A couple weeks ago, we went to a volleyball game. I opened the back end of my vehicle. My wife's $1,300 lens on her camera, which she had securely in her purse. So that's where you keep your cameras, in your purse, not in that big hefty camera bag. It rolled out of the back of my vehicle and shattered. What did she say? You better have that insured. I'm like, why would I insure it? It's supposed to be in this case. It was not a good discussion. So you can insure a lot of those things. Well, unfortunately, she did not have that discussion with her insurance agent. I'm her insurance agent. I didn't have that discussion. Are you going to keep it in the bag or are you going to carry it in your purse? Andre, you can't tell her I told that story. So insurance in general, and I've got my list here. There's a lot of stuff that just kind of will repeat. So broken down insurance in a couple of ways. Property. So property is the stuff you own, or you have. Your home, your four-wheeler, your guns, your rings, things like that. Stuff we can touch, we can see. Liability, that's the one we struggle with in the industry. What is liability? You can't see it, you can't touch it. When a claim happens and you're responsible, you figure out liability pretty fast. So the term liable, now we're back to the legal folks again. What are you liable for? It could be a statement you made. You get interviewed. You've got a competitor across the street. We've got there's a little lawsuit going on with the sunflower folks, the Giants and the Dutchmen. Has anyone had the Dutchman sunflowers? They're pretty good. I like them. I like Giants too. But there's a lawsuit going on. So now all of a sudden in the news, maybe one of those executives or someone, they're like, those no good SOBs, they're lying to the public. Well, is that a factual statement? We don't know that. He could actually get sued for that. It's part of your homeowner's policy. There's just crazy things that are built into the policy. And the other part of the insurance is there's exclusions. Insurance does a wacky thing. We give you a policy, and then we give you a whole list of exclusions. These are the things we don't cover. That's a big list. And then you turn the page and it says, but we'll give you this coverage back if. And then there's another page of, well, probably several pages of endorsements, add-ons, addendums for additional coverage. So now you're flipping back and forth, and you find out most of the stuff that they took away, you actually have coverage for because the policy's been endorsed. And it has to do with all of the cases that these guys deal with, because the policy should only be one page. Hey, here's your address, here's your house, this is what we'll cover. But they have to cover all the legal jargon that's been done, all the fighting. So you think about a sibling. Just think if you had to have a document with all the fights you've ever had with your sister. That'd be a big document. And then if anything came up, hang on a second, I gotta go back and research. 1977, you stole a Barbie doll. That's kind of what the insurance industry is like. So it gets super complicated, and you want to know what's in that policy. So liability is a tough one. Cyber liability. So now we have cyber. That sounds kind of scary. Computers, electronics. There was just a story this morning that China, their #1 currency is electronic. Very few people buy anything with cash. And that could go from buying a car, paying your utility bill, or buying, their example is hot buns on the street. They're using their phones to buy hot buns on the street. So how much data is being transferred? And I'm vibrating like crazy up here. I got a phone call, Apple Watch going. So how much data is being transferred? Where is it at? And who's responsible for it? So at TCI Insurance, we have an agency management system, I'm sure many of your companies have CRM systems. You have names, addresses, birth dates, contacts, appointments that you've had. If your system, maybe you take payments online, you have credit card payment information, a merchant. If your system is hacked, how does that affect you as a business owner? I'm still of the mindset, I should be a baby boomer, I'm still of the mindset, I got a file, it's in my hallway, and unless somebody physically breaks in and takes that file, I'm good. That's not the way it is anymore. We don't have files any longer. So, and they're on a server, which is not housed in our business, and of course it's redundant, so it's backed up, so it's housed in a couple places. So now we have several places that you have to find that. Adam Ham, our prior insurance commissioner, that was his big hot button. And that's what he's doing now. He's working in the insurance industry just on cyber. And employment liability, wrongful termination. There's transgender issues that have been huge in the news the last few years. I've had examples that have been presented to me as a case study, and I knew the answer. I'm like, yep, the employer did everything right. I was wrong. Cost him $700 grand, and he had an employer's liability policy, so that's what paid. Again, it's the liability of things that you can't see. You might think something's funny. I would be an excellent teacher of that good jokes, bad jokes, because I've got them both. And my wife tells me a lot of stuff that I think is funny is not funny. And of course, the part of the world we live in. There's a lot of standards and things that are okay here. Now we open a branch in San Francisco. Whole different work environment there. We will have to have some EPLI training with some of that employer's liability. So the discussion that we've had on the insurance side, just in the office, it's easy to say we insure stuff. So Bo's got a house, I insured Bo's house, it burns down, coverage kicks in. But really, if you break it down, what we're trying to do is insure your financial liability. We use the stuff to measure it. So I'm insuring your financial liability in your home. Because you can self-insure. If I win the lottery, do I really need a $400,000 policy on my house? I like Bo, I want to meet with him every once in a while, sure, I'll take the policy. But I don't need it. But that's why the bank requires me to have it. My financial liabilities in there. North Dakota, the auto policies, legal limits, $25,000 per person, $50,000 per accident, $25,000 property damage. That's not a lot. You can damage $25,000 worth of stuff probably between here and the parking lot, if you wanted to. So the example I always give, anyone been to Jamestown? The hill when you come off the exit, Wilhelm's is right there. They have all those new Cadillacs lined up. I said, what if you lose control of your car coming down that hill and you slide into the front row of those Cadillacs and you have $25,000 property damage? Rod Wilhelm's probably not be too excited about that. So then what happens? Hey, David, I'm getting sued. How much? $2.2 million. Holy buckets, what happened? I take out 25 Escalades. I don't know what the math is on that. But that's liability. And again, when would that ever happen? So insurance is a general transfer of risk. You're buying a known for an unknown, because none of us know what's going to happen. You give us premium, we take risk. The more premium you give us, the more risk we'll take. Now, can you be overinsured? What do you guys think as consumers?
Yes.
How many dang insurance policies am I supposed to have? You know, we named a handful of them. And it's true. And that's something we talk with people. We have some general guidelines in our agency. We will not write auto liability below this amount. Truthfully, some people don't need $1 million of auto liability because they don't have $1 million of assets. So what happens when I don't have assets to back up the damage that I did. I call that judgment proof. And that can happen too. And there are those discussions as well. It's like, well, what's your financial obligation? I really don't have any. Then you probably don't need any insurance. Well, these guys are making me have it. So those are discussions. We try to go on the other side. We try to talk in the millions of dollars of coverage versus the 25,000 side of it. Anybody in here have fleets? We'll say more than 3 vehicles in your business, okay? So the best way I can explain fleet, you like your employees, good people? Every once in a while, we run a driver's list. We find a guy that doesn't have a license or got a couple of DUIs, maybe a felony or 2. Well, if your name is John Anderson, and it's John Anderson's painting company, and you have a fleet of 20 trucks, every guy driving that vehicle or every girl driving that vehicle is John Anderson. So if John Anderson goes through an intersection with a skid steer on the back and hits a school bus, it doesn't matter who was driving the car, it's John Anderson's painting company that's liability. And every class that I go to, I assume it's the same for human resource, finances, legal. When I walk out of there, I'm just like, oh boy, we're gonna get sued. Because we have to have insurance as well if we make errors. So ours is errors and omissions, E&O. I think the industry calls it excitement and opportunity. Because when there's a big mistake, everything gets really exciting really fast. And when we walk out of those seminars, that's what we feel like is, oh, how can we go through 25 checklists with every single customer on every single policy just to make sure? And really what we lean on is the standardization process. The forms behind each of those policies are similar. So what agent should you be doing business with? I know you guys all know at least one agent because you all have insurance. Do you know 2, 5, maybe 10? The old can't swing a dead cat without hitting an insurance agent? I mean, there's a lot of people out there, and the level of expertise is widely varied. You look at your own industries, and you think of, I'm a contractor. Why does anybody do business with all these other guys? Because I'm the best. I think every business owner thinks that. So rather than just having a guy or a girl that takes care of your insurance, it's a value proposition. So some people have 3 cards, some people have 4 cards. We have price. Everyone shops on price. Who in here is driving the lowest cost car you can possibly purchase? Anybody? But price is usually number 1. Oh, here we got a couple guys. Yeah. But usually that's what's important to you, price. I want the lowest cost policy I can get. Give me the bare minimum. Well, let's look at your life a little bit. Do you live in the lowest cost house? No. You go to the lowest cost vacation? No. You buy the lowest cost coffee? No. So you would think your insurance coverage would kind of be driven the way you live your life. Low cost is usually not the way most business owners are doing things. They invest in their business, invest in their people. So keeping that in mind when you meet with your insurance agent, rather than, oh, jeez, I gotta see that guy again. I hate it, I'm so busy. But it's a huge part of your business. And one tendency that we see is as business goes down, insurance is the first place for people to cut. And we should flip it around the other way. Because if something does happen, that's the backboard for you. I think that'll save the day. I'm getting the time. Questions, comments, scenarios?
Insurance questions, comments, scenarios?
I know most people don't ask an insurance question unless they're holding a cocktail or some sort of beverage. All right.
No, the insurance problem starts that way.
Yeah.
Here, hold my drink. Yeah. Financial.
All right, well, I'm probably not as smooth of a conversationalist as Doug is, but I'll give it a try here. So I'm not going to go line by line on my 10 points, but I think most of what I cover in here will have been addressed in there. But starting with number one, I think it's important for people businesses to understand the fraud risks that are out there, and there are a ton of them. I referenced a couple of resources that are government resources. You can go online and take a look in there and just play around. It's amazing what you'll find. But specifically what I've been seeing in this community and in my industry in this community is two particular kinds of fraud risk, and one being business email compromise. So imagine that you're in a meeting one day, and when you come back from your meeting, somebody wired $100,000 out of your account. So you call your banker and you say, well, where did this money go? And your banker says, well, you sent me an email. Like, I didn't send you an email. Well, sure you did. It's right here. Well, what happens with business email compromise is sophisticated scam targeting businesses working with foreign suppliers and also businesses that regularly perform wire transfers. They're fishing for information before these wires go out, including your email, and they will change maybe one number or one letter in the email and send it to people in your office to conduct the wires, or they will send it to your banker to conduct the wires. And it looks very legitimate. People don't scrutinize every letter in an email, right? And this is often done when they know that you're going to be in a meeting and unavailable to address any questions that might come up. So how could you prevent something like this? This has happened, by the way, several times just in this last year, and one to the tune of $75,000. It was a painful conversation to have with a customer. So how to prevent it? It's important to have internal processes and verifications in your companies that you do not stray from. So if the wire goes out late, let it go out late. That's something that's easier to fix than finding $100,000 from China. So, and have some education with your employees on what phishing looks like. Who's calling in asking for information? What kind of information are they looking for? Any random phone calls with goofy questions?
Sorry, we normally have soda out on the table. It's cold, good, sir. Cold beer. Anyone?
And I know some businesses are larger and can afford this better, and some are smaller and might need to outsource this, but it's very important to invest in IT. Going back to earlier comments about cyber crimes and cybersecurity, a lot of the crimes that we're seeing right now is cyber related. So within your IT system, limit your administrator rights. Do not allow any employees to install software without receiving approval. And it's important to install and maintain antivirus, anti-spyware, spam filters, real-time malware detection and removal software to prevent these accounts from getting hacked in the first place. And then some ways your financial institution should be able to help you is having processes in place specific for wires. A callback. I know a lot of times people think that's annoying, that the wire won't go out until your banker calls you, even though you just spoke to them. But it's an important step, and it has prevented a lot of fraud. And there's other ways that you can do authentications using devices to identify the user outside of the simple name and password, transaction authentications with your cell phones to get approval codes or texts to validate the transactions. And then also some banks have intrusion detection software that you can download on your specific computers, and it's computer specific, and that detects malware. And in the backside of the bank or the financial institution, they can see if something is being inserted into your into your software structure. And those are fun phone calls to make because we get to say, something's not right, do you guys know about it? And usually they don't, and they're very thankful. The other fraud that we've been seeing recently is kind of old school, but it's business check fraud. And just in this last year, imagine you send out your vendor payments and you write a check out for $2,000 and you think it's going to go from point A to point B, and the next thing you know, you have a check clear your account for $200,000. This has happened in this community not that long ago. So what's happening is being just swiped out of your mailbox. So how are you sending out your checks? Anytime you send out a check, a paper check, your account number's on there. And so you may trust the person that it's going to, but you also have to trust the process between when it leaves your desk and where it gets to where it's going. So some ways to prevent that, of course, is positive pay and payee positive pay, and then also with ACH, using ACH filters and ACH blocks. But probably most importantly with checks, if you're writing checks in your company, you should have positive pay from your bank. It's cheap, very inexpensive, $5-10 a month. And also, if you have it, use it correctly. Upload the checks that you're sending out. Have someone check them. Any exceptions that are coming through, don't have it set to pay all and let them take vacation for a week, because that's what it's there for, is to check for any exceptions. Mobile banking can also allow for alerts and can aid in providing a way to authorize transactions while you're away from the office. And smaller businesses, I would recommend, if you can use online bill pay, do it, because a lot of times if it's a larger vendor that you're paying, they can automatically convert that online transaction instead of it into a check into an ACH. So you're taking that information off of the paper. Some common sense items: lock and audit your check stock. Don't just leave it in an unsecured desk or something like that. And then if you use e-statements, that takes your account number out of the mail system as well. So I would recommend using e-statements. And finally, and most importantly, reconcile your accounts daily. Reconcile your accounts daily. Reconcile your accounts daily. So when I get a customer that comes in to talk to me and say, I haven't looked at my bank statement for 2 months and there's a $1,400 check that went through 60 days ago, I'm like, well, what do you want me to do about it? You should. There's nothing I can do about that now. That's not on the bank. You need to know what's going through your accounts. So, gotta look at it every day. The other thing that I would talk about is, I know well, let me ask this question. How many of you trust your employees?
Trust them with what?
So I know we trust our employees, and we want to trust our employees, but internal fraud and internal investment is a real thing in this market and in this region and in the country. It's oftentimes a crime of opportunity, and maybe something has happened in your employee's life. There are a few common attributes to look for with internal embezzlement. People who are intelligent and inquisitive, they always want to know how everything works. If they're big spenders and they live beyond their means and have sudden larger-than-life purchases. If you have employees that are egotistical risk takers, that might be a red flag. And if they're rule breakers in and out of work life, that's something you should pay attention to. And also, we love our hard workers, right? But if you have a hard worker who's immune to stress and is in early, out late, and takes no vacations, you might want to require them to take about a week off so you can audit what they've been doing inside the office. And also, disgruntled. If you have employees that are unable to relax or experiencing drastic behavioral changes, that might be a red flag as well. So how can you protect yourself from internal fraud is, do not give end-to-end accounting responsibilities, implement checks and balances internally. Excuse me. And I know in small offices that's hard to do, and as a business owner, you need to probably be part of that process then. Make sure that you have your bank statements go to you first before your office manager reconciles everything. And don't assume long-term employees are incapable. So trust your employees, but verify. And like I said earlier, pay attention to employee lifestyle and extreme changes. Complete background and credit checks on employees handling money. And review cancel checks that come directly from the bank. So that's kind of it from internal and external fraud. I mean, it can go deep, and we can have a lot of conversations about what we've seen in the community, internally and externally. So I'd open up to any questions.
Any banking questions, financial questions? I know the BDB locally does a list of current scams going on, both financial and otherwise. It's always a good place to go and check once in a while. Even on the BDB's Facebook page, they'll list a current scam. And the BDB of North Dakota, Minnesota, they'll do local ones. They've also got a scam checker nationwide that you can zero into different areas, and they'll have all the reported scams going on in that area. It's interesting to see what's happening and how clever these people are.
Quick question, how many people have positive pay on their bank accounts? Okay. Hopefully next time I ask, I'll see more hands.
2 out of 45.
Go talk to your banker and get it, please.
Yeah.
What is it?
So what you do is if you're sending out checks, right, and making payments, you upload a file and you send it to your bank, and then when those items are presented to the bank, they are reconciled against that file. So if you write a check for $2,000 to company ABC, and the check comes back for $20,000 to company ABC, it's going to flag that, it's going to send an email to whoever is in your company that's looking at this, and then it's going to say, do you want to pay this or not? And then at that point, it's decisioned at the company level. And there's also payee positive pay, so it can be reconciled to both the dollar amount and who you're paying, the vendor.
And that's all forms of payment? Or just checks?
That's for checks. You can also do something similar with ACH.
So if you reconcile it, do you still recommend positive pay?
I do. It's just so it's inexpensive, and it's just a level of insurance that's less expensive than probably what he sells.
My boss was up there.
But I only recommend you do it if you're going to use it correctly. I know one particular business, they just had it set to pay all the exceptions, and what was the point of that?
Right.
So you have to watch it and monitor it, but yeah, I would recommend it, even if you do, if you reconcile your accounts daily, maybe it's not, it depends on how much volume is in those accounts, and so. Any other questions?
All right.
I guess the one thing to add, this goes back to the insurance issue. For attorneys with malpractice insurance, ask them what their policy limits are. And the one thing that I've run into in my practice is some of the older attorneys from, been practicing since the 80s or the late 70s, they bought their insurance in the late 70s or 80s and haven't changed their coverage levels since then. And I've had some cases come up where there's a $100,000 per occurrence limit. And that's a disaster because attorneys can do that much damage just, getting up in the morning. So for myself, I make sure I review it every year and I think, well, gee, if somebody sued me, exactly how much how much damage could I do to them? And it's significant. So I think just in terms of businesses as well, with your insurance company, review your policy limits and figure out exactly how much insurance you need.
So with that, we're going to cover a few HR topics. Jim?
Very good, thank you. First and foremost, were there questions on there? I'm sorry, I thought I heard something.
Oh,
Jessica, you want to cover just briefly what financial institutions' liability is for probably unauthorized checks that would come through someone's account, if there's any liability there?
If it's an error on the bank's part, I would imagine be some liability. And I kind of am a little leery answering this in front of an attorney. From a credit card and the Visa standards, those are a little different. That's going to be a different animal. Really, a lot of the liability is not on the bank. So for example, if I've had a lot of customers come to me and say, well, that's not my signature. Why did that check clear? Okay. Well, there is nobody in the back office verifying signature cards. The signatures on the hundreds of thousands of checks that come through. And the actual signature, excuse me, on the account is actually the legal agreement between the bank and the account. So the signature isn't necessarily what validates a check. It's the agreement between, the account agreement between the bank and the owner of the account. So it really probably depends on a case-by-case basis. How's that for a solid answer?
And I think that's good to clarify because, you know, you hear these situations where people print fraudulent checks and they somehow got the MICR code figured out, the magnetic clearing, and then they'll run it against somebody's account and people don't even know about it. And there's fraud occurring there, and I know that the lending institutions and banks also have liability insurance to cover that side, some fraudulent activity, but we all are responsible for looking at our accounts. But those things can clear the system pretty fast.
And that's why I do say reconcile daily, reconcile daily, reconcile daily. Because there's a very short window of time for a bank to return a check back to the original bank that it was drawn on. And so, I mean, less than a day, like a 24-hour time period really is what that is. Yes, Rich?
I was at the bank the other day and I got a customer that owed us money for a long time. I got a cashier's check and then I got one of the company checks. And the company check, the guy didn't sign it. So then I brought it to the bank and Bill said, well, run it through anyway. Well, I didn't do it, but he said a lot of times that you don't even need a signature on the check because it's electronically done, so it actually goes through without a signature.
It's possible that, you know, if it's just done in a large deposit, it's just going to get run through automatically. If you brought it to a teller line, it probably would be a different story. But if it's just a large deposit where they flip it through the MICR reader, it might not get caught. I wouldn't probably recommend the same thing Bill did.
Well, I was just worried about that the guy would say, well, I didn't sign the check, so you can't get the money back. Because I think he was just kind of trying to push me back because he wanted a product. And well, I wasn't going to give it to him until we got all the money.
He's a shady character. Yeah. He didn't sign it for a reason.
I think that's what he just wanted to hold us back. So we're still fighting with him on that.
Did it clear?
Well, no, I'm waiting for another cashier's check. Okay.
I think you might have done the right thing on holding on to that.
Mr. Bjoralt.
Very good. Thank you very much. Let me say, first of all, from a human resource standpoint, I'm a big advocate of having those people at your table as a big part of your executive team, your decision-making process. There are times I see out in the marketplace not enough of that. And I think you see out of the Society of Human Resource Management on a national basis and locally as well with FMHRA, that they obviously are advocating that. And I think it's very critical, as I see it here, between an attorney and an insurance guy, ironically, okay? There are legal issues, legal compliance pieces that you need to have, and there are also things that by law you don't have to have, and I'm going to talk about those, but may help you in warding off an insurance claim, a lawsuit, whatever it might be. And let me start out today by talking about or asking the question to, just in general, okay, is that how many of you out there as employers, okay, think that your salaried employees are exempt from overtime? Most employers think that. It's not necessarily true. You talk about your hourly people, and by law in North Dakota and everywhere else, you have to pay overtime after 40 hours, right? Okay. But there are cases where you may have a salaried employee that can come back after you, okay, for overtime. There's a couple pieces, just in general, I will mention, there's more to it. I don't want to get too deep into specifics, okay? But there's a salary criteria, or a annual wage criteria, weekly criteria, if I break it down that way. And there's a test And when I go back, let me go back a step and ask the same question. How many of you out there, okay, have in your employees' files, whether it again is paper, electronic nowadays, either way, okay, have your employees classified as exempt or non-exempt? And have properly done that, okay? And I can go back to 2016, I can go back to the Obama administration, okay? And they wanted to take that salary level and bump it. And let me talk to you specifically. Right now, okay, that salary test is $455 a week, okay, or $23,000, $23,600 annually, okay? So if you put a person out there that's making 23.6 or more, okay, and they go through this means test, for example, as an executive, a couple of those questions are, hey, do I manage 2 or more people? Do I make decisions within the company that are, critical to our success, so on and so forth? They can be classified as exempt. You don't have to pay them overtime, okay? If that person's making 23.6, sitting out there, let's just, for a bad example, say on the production line, not making any decisions, just doing their thing day in and day out, okay? They're technically not exempt. You would have to pay them overtime. See where I'm coming from? Okay? In 2016, Obama put out an executive order, for lack of better words, wanted to raise that 23.6 to 47.4. That's a huge jump. I had employers calling me saying, hey, I got an employee out there at $44,000 a year. I'm going to end up having to pay them overtime on top of that. What do I do? They bump it to the 47.4. Give this person a raise. It's probably less out of their pocket in the long run. What was it? Some 14 states come back and say, look, attorney generals, we're going to take this to court. They did. The court in Texas ruled it was unconstitutional. And the employers call me back and say, how do I take that salary away from those employees? Ouch, right? Okay? Now, that has been obviously rescinded, or it's sitting out there. We don't know what's going to happen. We will probably see the Trump administration act on it in one way, shape, or form. My guess is that what's going to probably happen is that they're going to take that 23.6 and raise it, okay, to something that's maybe has a little bit more common sense put to it. Let's put it that way. But my point is, from the Fair Labor and Standards Act, you have to classify your employees exempt or non-exempt. I will talk about job descriptions here in a minute, but in my book, that's one of the best places then to refer to it, put it, okay, but have it in their file. We could talk a little bit about here, what do I have next on the list? Employee handbooks. Employee handbooks are not required by law in any way, shape, or form. Can they help ward off lawsuits? I think big time. What you're going to hear me talk a lot about, okay, is communication. I was talking to some people here before the start of the event here, and the majority of what I do probably starts with a handbook. Because most employers that call me will say, hey, I need to start someplace, where do I start? And I will always suggest probably the handbook. Let's get everybody on the same page. Let's get everybody communicating, and we'll go from there. And I'll talk a little bit more about the handbook. Again, not required by law, but I think wards off a number of issues, from dress code to meal breaks to bereavement, which I'll talk about, jury duty, the list goes on. Equal opportunity, some things you have to have out there anyway, you can include in the handbook. So anyway, we can talk about, it doesn't take a lot to create that handbook. Depending on the size of your company, it's going to vary. You know, when you start to get over 20, you're gonna have some things in there at 20 employees. When you're at 50 plus, you're gonna have to allude to family medical leave and so on and so forth. So there are some differences, but again, it can promote a lot of discussion, a lot of communication. At least people are asking, coming to their manager, their supervisor, you as an owner, saying, hey, look, what can I do? So on and so forth. But again, you're talking about it. Probably the best thing that can happen. We can talk about performance appraisals. Performance appraisals, again. Let me go back, let me talk job description first. Again, a job description, not required by law. I talked about exempt versus non-exempt. Should be in that file with your job description. One thing a job description can do, will do, okay, is make sure that you're talking about ADA, the Americans with Disability Act, okay? And in this job description, this job duties, the essential functions I need to perform, okay, can we make reasonable accommodation? I use retail as an example. You have a person confined to a wheelchair, has to use a cane, crutches. There's no reason, okay, they can't have a stool like we're sitting on behind that till, okay, bringing up a customer's order. You could make a reasonable accommodation. And what I'm trying to get across, I guess, to everybody is these are things you have to think about that we go through every day. I notice it. I look at any store I walk into, any business I walk into, I'm scanning, okay, because it's what I do, I guess, okay, but something we just need to be aware of. Performance appraisals the same way, you know, not required by law, but again, with that job description, going back a step, spelling out those essential functions of the job, talking about those tasks that one needs to complete to perform or satisfy that essential function. Maybe it's a situation where there's some physical demands, okay, lifting. Maybe it's the cold, maybe it's standing, maybe it's the heat. Those really need or should be spelled out, okay? And again, the great communication piece ties into the performance appraisal, okay? In any way, shape, or form, how you want to measure that individual's performance. How they've completed those essential functions of the job, those tasks involved. And what better can we do as an owner and an employee, or as a team, okay, make our business that much more productive from that perspective. I-9s. Everybody complete I-9s on a new hire? You better be done, right?
Correct.
Does everybody understand that you need to file those, okay, in a certain way, right? Not in your employee's file. They are filed separately, okay? Is the big concern. Quick example, I walked into an employer once and it was one of the first things I noticed. Fairly large employer, but they were filed separately, but they were just in a stack. They weren't alphabeticalized, okay, or chronologically. They were just a mess. But you can be audited, you can be fined if you do not have your I-9s properly filed, stored, okay? That is from your current employees, and then you have to do that as well with terminated employees, and you have to retain those for a certain period of time. So again, off, away, separate, okay, from that individual personnel file. Okay. I mentioned here a little bit with bereavement, and I guess I threw it out there. Kurt and I were talking about it one day, but a little bit more of a kind of a touchy subject, okay, when I've been doing policy manuals with employers. Because it's been, and that's fine. You can say, hey, I'm gonna, you know, my employee, she lost her dad, you know, okay, here's 3 days, or here's 5 days, or whatever our policy might be, okay? But when you talk about where we're at today in society with gender issues, transgender issues, okay, significant others, okay, are you treating everybody the same? Are you treating everybody fairly? And I've probably in the last, I was trying to think about it, but if I even went to the number 10 and said, hey, I've done 10 policy manuals, and the last 10 I've done, I've probably had a bereavement policy in 9 out of those 10 that has said, hey, that domestic partner is going to receive the same benefit, okay, that married couple, okay, husband and wife, have been receiving. So it's just something to think about, to maybe cover that angle, to cover that issue, to cover that problem that may arise down the road if you haven't addressed it. It might be in the back of your mind. My suggestion is you should probably pay a little bit more attention to it sooner than later. I can touch on jury duty. By law, you have to allow your employee, obviously, jury duty. Whether you pay them or not, that's up to you. If you pay them, they can bring that jury duty money back to you, or they can keep the jury duty money and you don't have to pay them for their time. But again, something out there, something to think about, something to make sure you have noted in policy from that perspective. Another subject just to touch on quickly, I talk about ERISA. When you're talking about the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, we're talking way back 1974, administered by the Department of Labor, and simply looking out for those employees' rights, whether it's pay, equality in pay. A lot of it centers on welfare benefits. Jim, I think you're familiar with a lot of that, run into a lot of that with ERISA. Okay, the retirement people do, because it centers on qualified retirement plans, welfare plans. When I'm talking welfare nowadays, I'm talking health, dental, vision, life, you know, and the qualified retirement plan. But there's requirements out there that you need to report, okay? 5,500 forms, depending on the size as an employer, okay? You have to provide to your employees, and I know a lot of your insurance companies and 401k administrators are doing that, providing, you know, an SPD, a summary plan description of those benefits, providing a SAR, what they call a summary of annual, you know, a summary on an annual basis of those particular benefits. If there's a change, if you change your health insurance, for example, you have by law 270 days to report to those employees what they call a summary of material modification, right? SMM. So they're out there. What did ERISA do? What did the Department of Labor do, I guess? They added about, you know, was it just over 1,000 positions in the last couple, 3 years? Okay. They've said they're going to be out there by somewhere between 2018, 2020, and audit 90% of the businesses in this country to make sure that you're complying, okay, with filing your 5500s, your summary plan descriptions. You know, there are a number of companies out there that will do that for you. A lot of times your insurance company will do that, but my point is make sure to check. I was in the retirement business for a while. I know our company at that time automatically on the qualified retirement side filed the 5,500 forms for our clients. I don't want to make the assumption that every company is today. I would like to think they are, but it doesn't hurt you to go back and double check. One last thing I could talk about, and a couple things maybe, and let's just jump one to one with, and it's not on here, but I had a call a couple days ago. Both these employers are over 50 in size, okay? Both are regulated by family medical leave, okay? The particular individual needs to go out for some surgery. She's going to be laid up for a month, okay? So she goes through the proper protocol to tell her employer that, get the okay for 4 weeks of family medical leave. She's going to have surgery next week. As of Monday, 2 days ago, because she had interviewed for another job, she got a phone call that says, we'd like to hire you. Okay? Now with family medical, and just an FYI is what it is, or for you people to think about things. She's got 4 weeks of family medical leave. She can really not put her 2-week notice in while on family medical leave. She could, but there's repercussions. One of those is her health insurance. So I'm out there, I'm 2 weeks into my family medical leave, I put my 2-week notice in, okay, that I'm not coming back at the end of that 4 weeks. That employer, by rights, all obligations will, under family medical leave for that employer, will cease. They could go back, for example, and take, in this case, November's premium and ask that back from her. She goes to a new employer and doesn't get, and they're over 50 in size, she will not or can't enjoy the benefit of family medical leave till she's worked there for 12 months. So there's a lot of, I guess talking out loud, there's a lot of stuff out there that one needs to be aware of, okay? That can happen with American with Disabilities Act, ERISA, family medical leave, and the list goes on. And I'll talk about one subject, and we'll leave it at that, and I mentioned it again to Kurt this morning, because it's been in the news and in the limelight, and that's harassment, namely sexual harassment. We've seen it from Hollywood to politics to, wherever.
He was not accusing me of sexual harassment.
No, it's not, no.
That came out.
Thanks for clarifying that, Kurt.
Thank you.
Anyway, again, in policy manual form, and if you don't have a policy manual, again, I'm suggesting that I think it's something you need, obviously, if you happen to talk about, okay, with your staff, with your employees. And the two things surface. One is obviously it can't be tolerated, okay? From a verbal standpoint, from a physical standpoint, from a written standpoint, it just, visual standpoint, obviously it's easy to stand up here, we all agree, it can't be tolerated. My biggest concern is that you have a process, okay, to address that. You can still pound it and pound it and pound it, and it might not be foolproof with some, if I could call them an idiot, I'm going to, okay? But a lot of times what I see is that if somebody, comes to you and says, hey, or screaming of harassment, sexual harassment, it's nice to have a process to be able to go through it. And depending, again, the size of your company, maybe it's that immediate, step one, that immediate supervisor and or manager. Or 2, to human resources if it continues, or 3, to, okay, CEO, president, ownership, whatever the case may be. I've had a couple of examples where the chief financial officer calls me one morning and he says, hey, one of the partners is out driving around, he's scared to come into work. I said, what happened? He said, well, he and a couple of the staff went out for a couple of beers after work last night. And he got a little dicey with what he was talking about, some of the jokes. iffy, gray, crossing the line, call it what you want. Then he started texting, and he's driving around, he doesn't dare come into work this morning. What do I do? Well, I had done a policy manual, we had a process in place, we followed it, and bottom line, everything turned out just fine. I mean, it was like, could have been a tough issue, you know, from that standpoint. Last but not least, I'll leave you with this, and that is, I had a call from an attorney here in town, okay, good friend of mine, and he called me a little bit tongue-in-cheek. He also called me somewhat serious. One of his clients in Minneapolis, a group of about 15 in size, okay, had called him and said, hey, we'd like to have an appreciation breakfast for our employees, a pancake feed. An employee of 15 in size, okay? But the kicker is, we'd like to have a topless pancake flipper. And I said, you had to call me for that?
Again,
no, he said,
that
but
was
I
not-
figured you'd be interested. So, but the employer was dead serious. The only female that worked in that company was his wife. She was the office manager, the payroll, the administration, the whole 9 yards. And he said, she doesn't care. Really? Okay. You gonna have a little vodka with your orange juice and pancakes? And you want to take that risk? I don't think so. And he did. But I was seriously thinking about it. So you wonder sometimes. There's never a dull moment in my business. So. But questions? Anything? I rambled a little bit, but just again, there are things you can do. What's that?
Was pancake flipper male or female?
Female. Anyway, just some thoughts, just some awareness. Yes, sir.
John, as the company grows, what are the size requirements when new HR policies come into play?
20 would be your first jump step. Then 50 typically is where you're going to see that happen. 20 is going to start to get you into the Americans with Disabilities Act, okay, and some of those issues. 50, you start to talk about, you know, difference with some of the military, difference with some of the family medical leave and those type things. So. Go ahead, Kurt. Thank you.